Zach Weaver with it. Yeah.
Been watching a lot of Summer League past few days, which some people might call me a sicko for doing, but that's
I will.
okay.
But who's impressed you?
You're talking about, you want a specific guy or a Big East related guy?
Probably more Big East.
I watched Jordan Hawkins last night. He looks comfortable as a shooter. He didn't shoot it great. He hasn't shot it great in the first two games for the Pelicans, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be around a long time just because he's so good at shooting off the move. I don't think he's going to have a huge problem. I've seen some of Colby Jones. I thought he kind of looks the part as well of a guy that can kind of be, sort of like in college, a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. Wembanyama had a much better game last night than
no kidding
than his first one. But a guy that I've always been high on in college, and he didn't. The past few years they haven't really done a whole lot. They've kind of just been okay. At Florida was Colin Castleton.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
He's done some really nice things. Watching him for the Lakers, he's a guy with a similar type of build to Kalk, maybe a little bit shorter than Kalk. I'm not 100% sure, but he's a little bit more athletic, a little bit more versatile as far as can bring the ball up the floor if he catches a rebound and kind of lead the break himself. But gosh, that's a guy that I look at and I would think if I'm Ryan Kalkbrenner, I would try and model some parts of improving my game to almost be sort of like Colin Castleton.
Yeah. You were going to say that, and I was going to interrupt you and say that too. I've always thought that he reminded me a lot of Kalkbrenner. Like you said,
they just have a very similar build.
He's a little smoother with the ball,
Yep.
But yeah, very similar. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
If we're talking Big East guys, Cam Whitmore has looked really good.
He certainly looks the part from a body standpoint and a physical standpoint. I mean, on that same team, Jabari Smith has been really good for the Rockets. It's just the summer league is funny. You get some of these teams. If you watch like the Hornets, for instance, they have Bryce McGowan, who obviously played at Nebraska for a year. I mean, but they've got all these guys that are kind of the wing mold that all want the ball. They all want to score, and so it's interesting watching him and Brandon Miller and Amari Bailey from UCLA and this Nick Smith Jr. from Arkansas. It's like there's not a whole lot of movement and continuity. They all want to get the ball and kind of go one-on-one. But another Nebraska guy I watched yesterday and I thought actually looked pretty comfortable out there and certainly has the physical profile would be Sam Griesel. Mm-hmm. Plays for the Celtics. He doesn't really have the jump shot, I don't think, to stick at that level. But it was sort of interesting. Saw Alex O'Connell knock down a couple of threes for the Kings, so it'll be interesting to see if Alex sticks around with the G League team this year, or maybe tries his luck overseas or whatnot. But
where's Zagorowski now?
I don't. Marcus played a little bit last year in the G League. He's not on a summer league roster. I would imagine, if I had to guess, Marcus will probably try and go overseas. That's just my educated guess. I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe some of these guys try and stick it out in the G League for a few years, as long as possible, before they really kind of see the writing on the wall. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Marcus or not, but I would imagine
Tyshawn?
He tries to go overseas. Tyshawn also not on a summer league roster, if I'm not mistaken.
The only Creighton player that's on one is Alex O'Connell.
Is Alex, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I don't know. It'll be, Tyshawn was in the G League again last year. He's another guy, sort of, he's another guy sort of like Marcus. Is like, does he just try and go overseas at this point? I don't know.
Yeah. I would say this, we've kind of like gone through some phases where, we had a couple athletes like Marcus Foster and Justin Carter, those guys with that build. Then we moved up to some more talented guys that were bigger with like Tyshawn, Mitch, so forth. Zagorowski, instead of a 5'11" point guard, we had a 6'2" point guard.
Yeah.
And now I feel like we're edging even closer with guys like Kaluma and Trey and Shireman and obviously Kalk, but he plays a different position. But I feel like we're edging even closer toward the elite top, where our teams look, for so long we had teams play us, and we'll get when we talk about these games later on. We had teams play us where we just played. I'll never forget the time we played Missouri when Quinn Snyder was coach, and this is back in the Altman era, and they come out on the floor, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to get killed. Like, they were so much bigger than us, yet we beat them by like 25 points because, Quinn couldn't coach at that time, and Dana could, and, we had guys that knew how to play the game, and they were just like athletes. They had the foreign guy. What was his name? Played in the NBA.
For who, Missouri?
Yeah. It's probably 15 years ago. God, what was his name?
The only NBA guy, main guy I think most people probably associate with the Quinn Snyder would be Kareem Rush.
Yeah. He had, on that same team, he had a really good guard that I think got a cup of coffee in the NBA too.
Okay.
I can't think of the guy's name. Anyway, he's a typical Euro player. There were just dime a dozen at that time. But at any rate, today's show, we're going to cover some things that are happening on the Hilltop, get you up to date on those. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the golf tournament as that edges ever closer. And then we're going to do a fun exercise that we've kind of promoted on Twitter here today. We're picking the top 5 games in the Greg McDermott era, regular season games in the Greg McDermott era. And we're grading them on, excitement, gravity of the game, the atmosphere of the game, and then any other little things that each of us wanted to throw into. I kind of looked at it a little bit more like staying power, some of those games, some of those games back when they were played, they were like, oh my God. And now you're just like, maybe that's a top 10, but at any rate, we'll talk about that in a little while. So let's head to the Hilltop. So Creighton, and I've seen this before, but I never really knew what it was. But Creighton finished 3rd in the D1 AAA Sports Trophy, which is basically the AAA is the AAA. That's for schools that don't have football. And what it is you've seen, who sponsored the cup thing they always do? There's a sponsor for that where they rank everybody, based on football, basketball, all the sports.
It might be it might be Capital One.
Yeah, I think so. They, how you see it during football games, they'll show the standings of all the different, very similar, except obviously these schools don't have football. So there's 21 sports they get graded on, and Creighton obviously scored very high on basketball, almost got the max points on basketball, got a lot of points on volleyball, and got a ton of points on soccer. Those are the 3 main sports that made it a long way in the NCAA. So that helped them get a 3rd place finish. I think it's their best finish. Oddly enough, since they were in the Valley, they had a really good finish one year, because I think that year, not only was soccer really good, the baseball team was really good that year. We got to the regional. So congratulations to all the athletes at Creighton for getting that award. We had discussed this, I think, briefly about adding, the ever-changing landscape of college athletics and some of these Olympic sports, and if they were going to be able to add coaches and so forth. And there was some, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not they will or won't, because obviously it's more money and they're, budgetary concerns and so forth. It looks like the soccer team did add that extra coach as Mitch Cavanaugh, who is a volunteer assistant on the team last year, is now the new assistant coach and technical director. So a lot of video duties in his lap. But so congratulations, Mitch, new member of the soccer staff under Johnny Torres. Then, that Bahamas trip is coming up fast. That's only about 2-3 weeks away, the 3rd through the 9th. And I was just looking at some stuff today, and I was like, man, probably would have been fun to go. Would have been fun to go, but you can't go on every trip. Hey, I've spent a ton of time at Atlantis and around there, because every time we took the grandkids on a Disney cruise, that's where they stopped. So I've spent a ton of time there. Pretty cool place. I've always, when I've walked around there, and of course we're there for like 4 hours, then we got to get back on the boat. So you don't have a ton of time, but I always felt like it'd be cool to stay there sometime. They got a pretty cool sports book. They got, they got a pretty good gambling setup, and, there's just tons of stuff to do around there. I have gone swimming with the dolphins and so forth, but it would be kind of fun to go there at some point. We had that trip. I was planning on going on that trip that got canceled because of COVID.
What? Were they supposed to go there the year of COVID?
Yeah.
Or they're supposed to play in Battle for Atlantis. That's right.
Yeah. Wichita was going to be there. That would have been kind of cool.
That's right.
It was a pretty good field. And then they moved it. Didn't they move it to Sioux Falls? And then we had to bow out because we got COVID.
Yeah.
And then that field just disintegrated. There was hardly anybody left in that field by the time we were done. But, I was really looking forward to that because there's also a resort north of town that's got a Jack Nicklaus golf course, and it's right on the ocean. It's a 5-star resort, and that looked pretty cool too, to stay there too. But I was looking for, staying there longer term and hanging out. That'd have been a lot of fun. I just remember we had the party bus when we were in Vegas twice now, and people there were like, "Tim, you got to get a party boat for next year."
I talked recently with Coach Vanderloo on the phone, and we were reminiscing about our cruise. I say our crew, CREW, not cruise, but our team going to Bahamas. 2000. That would have been summer of 2011.
Yeah. And they only get these trips once every 4 years. So the last one, I think, was Australia, right? I think so.
Yes, and have they been to Italy?
Yeah.
As one of the others?
Italy was before Australia, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, can take 0 from these games. I know the last time they were in Australia, we had kind of a new team, and we're all like, oh, my God, we're seeing highlights of these. You can take absolutely nothing from these games.
I remember Italy, because Cole Huff looked crazy athletic in all of the highlights they were showing.
Cole Huff.
Well, he was crazy athletic before his knees just gave out. That was a bad part about that. But, yeah, so it'll be a great bonding experience for the team. We've got a couple of new faces, so it'll be good for them. Heard nothing but great things about Ashworth and the kind of person he is and how he's going to fit in on this team. So that's really exciting. Matt DiMarias and a few other people piled on John Rothstein today when he said, "Oh, he's most under the radar transfer is Ashworth," and I'm thinking, well, he was pretty heavily recruited by teams when he said he was going to transfer. So I don't know how under the radar he is necessarily, but good for him. So that's coming up August 3rd through the 9th. I know they had a package where you could go. You didn't have the airfare, like normally they go on the all on the plane with the team and everything, but you had to do your own airfare. But they had a package for the hotel deal and tickets to the games and all that kind of stuff. So, but I wonder how many people taking. It's got to be ungodly hot down there.
Yeah, but it's also the Bahamas, so.
It's humid. It's humid when you go down there in like September. I can't imagine this time of year. It's got to be crazy. But anyway, hey, it's Blue Jay Banner Golf Tournament coming up almost a month from now, a little more about 38 days away. August 19th, we're having a flurry of activity as I kind of push some people who said they were going to play to sign up. So I kind of got an idea, I know people like to go, "Now, what's the rush?" Oh, well, when you're running a golf tournament like this, it's kind of nice to know, do you have 20 groups or do you have 30 groups, right? To enhance the experience if you have 30 groups, so it's kind of nice to know. But at any rate, we've garnered a couple of top-notch sponsors. West Pacific Dental Group and Dr. Robert Hogan, once again, are our title sponsor of our golf tournament. We thank them so much, as well as sponsors of our show here. And then also just today, Top Golf sponsors are going to be one of our title sponsors as well. They're going to be the sponsor of the lunch and awards ceremonies, and plus helping us get another one of these cruise packages available for silent auction. So we appreciate all that they're doing for the golf tournament as well. So I think we got about only 10 spots left. So people are going to have to sign up that are thinking about playing. You need to go on to BlueJayBanner/golf and sign up today. And if you got any questions, just shoot us an email at bluejaybanner@gmail.com and we'll help you out. But it's going to be a fun time. We've got a lot of great things. I'm meeting with Bennett over at Dodge Riverside later this week, so we'll get that all set up.
It'll be nice to get to a new venue. Not that I have anything against Shoreline, and I appreciate them hosting, but it'll be nice to kind of get this tournament on a new venue.
Yes, and I think it's a real good like scramble course because it's not very long, but it is tree line. Like you know, you got to keep the ball in the fairway. You can gamble a lot. There's a couple dog legs where you can gamble. There's a hole that's got water, short par four. It's got water in front. You can gamble if you can hit it long enough. You got some par fives you can reach. So it's going to be a very, very fun event, and should be a great time. So we're lining up tons of silent auction items, tons of raffle items. We got some Creighton golf bags coming. We got. I'm working on getting some more tons of memorabilia, and we'll have the usual items as well, like this autographed basketball, which might be pretty valuable this year, you know? So anyway, check it out, BlueJayBanner/golf. Sign up as soon as possible because those spots are going fast.
Did you see Pat Fitzgerald's gone?
I just saw something on the TV where they popped up Northwestern. I did not see he got terminated. Did he not? Did he?
He got terminated.
Well, apparently this story kind of like it started slow and it just sounded like, he really didn't know anything. And then it sounded like the student newspaper dug into it a little bit and they found out a lot more information.
Yep. It's a crazy deal. Not only that, but now Bob Huggins is not going silently into the night at West Virginia.
Well,
what a sad deal. He's just it's almost like he's this old guy who just won't he wants to go out his own way, and this is not the way he envisioned himself going out, and so now he's going to make a big fuss about it.
And don't drive down the road with tons of beer cans in your car.
It's sad. I mean, they haven't been very good the past few years. They've really underperformed, but he is kind of synonymous with college basketball the past 3 decades.
I was really looking forward to Kyrsa, with Kyrsa being his point guard. It was just going to be kind of a different look for them. I was interested, but it just all boils down to me. I mean, where did this statement come from? If as he contends, he didn't write that statement, then we got a problem if we're West Virginia. If they wrote that statement for him and said it was from him, that's a big problem. Now, if he agreed to it, even though he didn't sign it, then you're in legal muddy waters there, The
whole thing is crazy. Even if he is technically, let's say hypothetically, he's 100% correct. They just kind of drafted that for him, and at this point, he's still just kind of embarrassing himself. I don't know if it's a play to get severance money. Maybe it is.
I'm sure
he can't be so naive to think that they might go through this process, maybe in court, of he said, and they're just going to let him back as the head basketball coach. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Right. I mean, they could turn around and say, okay, you're fired.
Right.
Because, you've had 2 incidents here in the last 3 months that are pretty serious. Yeah. Probably, I mean, I don't know how you judge these things, but certainly on the level of Fitzgerald, you know what I'm saying? It's
crazy deal.
Yeah. So, yeah, you wonder. I always felt that Pat Fitzgerald was the only thing that was keeping Northwestern relevant. The job he was doing, recruiting and coaching and his strategy and so forth. I just wonder how that'll all turn out now. Because it's tough in 10. It's tough. It's only going to get tougher.
When you're a guy that kind of prides himself on culture, and then this is the thing that comes out.
It doesn't shock me, though, because he's such a hardcore football guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's old school.
I think the smoking gun that came out was they were using hand signs to, because it's a whole hazing thing. They were using hand signs to point out who they would haze, and Fitzgerald was caught doing some of those hand signs. That's what.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think the interesting thing too is, they've been horrible. Pat Fitzgerald's got the best job on. I've never quite understood why everybody has praised him as just this unbelievable football coach and this, that, and the next. I mean, he has one okay year once every like 4 or 5 years,
right?
And has kind of lived off that. Now, obviously, I recognize how difficult it is to win consistently.
Right. That's I think the deal. Nobody's been able to win there. Gary Barnett, I guess, is okay.
But it's. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting. I mean, if you go with, do you get rid of Fitzgerald and then you just hire one of the coordinators now as interim? But maybe the coordinators probably knew about all this crap too. I don't know.
How do you do that this late?
Right.
It'd be different if this was in January. My goodness, they're going to be in training camp here shortly.
Yep.
That's tough road, but yeah. But what happens when there's all this money involved?
That is true.
All right. I'm excited to get to this. Zach, you want to go first? So let me set this up again. So these are the 5 greatest regular season games in Greg McDermott's tenure at Creighton.
I left out Big East tournament games. Is that?
I did not include Big East tournament games either. I feel like that's the postseason, but I felt like multi-team events were, that's just a regular season game, But we went off like, was the game exciting? How much gravity was there on the game? What, sure, there might have been a close game against, Doug's year against St. John's when he hit a shot, but St. John wasn't very good. So that wasn't, a big gravity game. And then just, the atmosphere. So that would tend to lean toward home games, although I know Ross and I had a similar thought on a road game, which we'll get to in a little bit. But Zach, why don't you pull up yours and let's break it down.
Yeah, I can do
and
that.
And then we used other things, our own personal just taste. I think we'll all talk about these as we come up on them.
Did you want me to screen share?
Oh, you mean you would like to do that?
I'm asking you. Do you have the lists in front of you for everybody?
You're good, man.
All right.
You can go.
Let's see. Pop this up.
But anyway, so everybody's going to have different opinions and different thoughts on games and so on and so forth. I might judge something a little differently than Ross, and Zach might judge something a little differently than us two. And, just because of your favorite, I mean, there's a game that when I thought of this game. Now I did not end up putting in the top 5, but it's a game I'll talk about in a little bit.
I'm just going to pass on the screen share for now. We saw each other's lists.
All right. So knock it out.
Number 5, I had home versus number 1 Gonzaga, just for the sake of, that's the first time. Was that the first time that we had a number 1 at home?
No, Villanova.
Villanova was that we lost a really close game. That was with Mo Watson, right? We were tied. Tied late. And then Villanova went on a 10-0 run to finish out the game.
Which that one is in my top 5, but I digress. We were actually beating Gonzaga at half of that of this game that Zach was talking about.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it was a non-conference game and we pulled the number 1 team in the country as that second half of the home and home.
Yep.
It was just kind of a prestige thing for me.
It was a Saturday game. Fun game.
Yep.
That's a weird one. That's a weird one that I did not even consider. I don't know why. I just didn't. I think I was so upset at the end of the game. If you remember, Gonzaga had the ball. A guy took 4 steps and they didn't call traveling when we trapped him in the half court. God, I couldn't believe. I just still ticked off about that call. That would have totally changed the game at the end of the game. But anyway, I digress.
Then at number 4, I had that first home game in the Big East versus Marquette on New Year's Eve. Just again,
another good one.
It just felt like another stepping stone. You know what I mean?
A game I considered.
And we beat the brakes off of them too.
Yeah.
A game I considered. A game I think lost as time has gone by, has lost a little luster just because that was big game at the time because we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look back at the game, it wasn't a really great game. I mean, it was like 63-49. It wasn't, I don't know. It was New Year's Eve. There was a lot of controversy over that, playing on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
It turned out great, don't get me wrong. But no, good. No, again, there's probably 30 games you could throw in here, and that's certainly one of them.
Then number 3, I had Doug's 41 against the final game against Wichita in the regular season. Just because you didn't really know if he was going to come back after that. That very well could have been his final home game. And to go out like that would have been crazy. But that's why I have it number 2, his 45 against Providence in what was his final home game, which was just to be there was insane. I've never seen anything like that, you know. And then number
you had
1,
that number 2? You had that number 2?
I had that number 2, yeah.
Okay, I did too. All right.
Yeah, just being there and witnessing that was crazy.
You had Warren Buffett there.
Yeah. And then number 1, not really controversial, that 2020 game against Seton Hall for the share of the Big East Conference title.
When you hold that game up to all the other ones were...
That one's the undisputed number 1.
Yeah, when you're holding that game up, it had everything, right? Mm-hmm. Conference title on the line, an absolutely stoked crowd that was packed, the best student section we've ever had for any game.
And then like a week later, the world practically ended.
Yep.
Yeah. And then an exciting game. And then you had controversy at the end when Mamu got teed up. You know, it was so good. It was just so good. Willard was all picked off. It was just everything you wanted. Everything you wanted in a game. And it was a really good Seton Hall team too. And that game was, it just, when you compare all these, like if you took the 25 or 30 and put them all up, all those other games are missing a little bit of what that game had. You know what I'm saying? In different areas. Yeah. All right, Roscoe.
All righty. Number 5, I had the 2016 game versus Wisconsin, where we kind of beat the brakes off of them a little bit, or at least late in the game, ran away with it. Kind of the Justin, I said this in our text, kind of the Justin Patton coming out party. A big dunk by Kyrie late. That was kind of the first time everything came together as a big crowd, fun crowd. Everybody kind of said, this team could be really, really good. That team was very, very good up until Maurice Watson's ACL. So that was my 5. Number 4, we've already talked about it, was Doug's 45 on senior night. For him to do that on senior night is truly remarkable. Number 3, the New Year's Eve game, the first time we played a number 1 ranked team, Villanova at home, same season, the Maurice Watson, Justin Patton, Kyrie season. Really fun game. Ended up losing. That Villanova team was
that
ridiculous.
New Year's Eve, Ross?
That was New Year's Eve.
Was it a late? I don't remember.
No, it was an afternoon. It was like a noon game.
All right. That's what I thought.
that Villanova team had Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Chris Jenkins, Eric Pascal. I'm missing somebody. But they were just, I mean, all these guys that played in the NBA and still play in the NBA. I mean, that team was ridiculously talented.
Mikal Bridges? Is that? Or
I
was he
think,
gone the year
I think, no, I think Mikal was
he was there that
on
year.
that team.
He was a freshman on
Yeah,
that team?
he was young on there. Because we played him, 2 or 3 years?
The Mikal Bridges Villanova team would have been the 2018 team.
Yep. Okay.
So I mean, yeah, you go back and look at some of those Villanova rosters, and it's laughable how much talent they had.
Right.
And my number 2, which upon further thought, I think I might have this a little bit high. The more I think about it, was us, kind of a low expectations Creighton team after the Sweet 16 COVID year, right before Christmas. A Villanova team that ends up going to the Final Four that year, just absolutely beating the doors off of Villanova at home. I thought the crowd was incredible that night, and you know how vocal and critical I can be of the crowd. I thought the crowd was incredible. We totally, played an unbelievable game and a great atmosphere. It was right before Christmas. Alex O'Connell was making everything. Hawkins was making everything. Even Roddy was making shots down the stretch. It was just a really fun game. It was a Friday night. It was just a really, really fun game.
Was that the one where Dixon was the only guy that could make shots for them that night? Or did we leave him alone?
Dixon killed. No, it might have. Dixon killed us at home this year. I don't know if you think about this past year, but Dixon.
No, that wasn't that.
Dixon killed us both games this past year, but again, that might be a little bit too high upon further review, but that was one that was really fun. And then obviously the Seton Hall conference title game is number one. It always will be number one. I can't imagine something crazy would have to top that, in my opinion. I sent you a few honorable mentions. The Gonzaga at home one that Zach talked about. This past year, it's fresh, but the Arkansas win in Maui was unbelievable, I thought. And one that doesn't get talked about near as much because it was on the road is that win at Seton Hall in late February 2020 to keep us in the hunt. And Damian Jefferson had that great play where he dove on the floor and flipped it back to Marcus. And I was doing the radio with John Bishop that game at Seton Hall, and oh my God, I mean, that was as fun of a game as I can remember in the MAC era. And then I'm going to give you one more honorable mention that no one ever talks about because it's the worst team in the MAC era, was the year after Doug. But that team was down 20 at halftime at home to Oklahoma and came back and beat them. And that's a forgotten one, obviously, because that's kind of a forgotten season, but that's my last interesting honorable mention one.
That was a big Isaiah Zierden game, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Ferrarini, I didn't feel it was so forgotten. When this came up, the first game I thought of, the very first game. And then as I accumulated, 10, 15 games, I said, that was not a good team that year. And so that kind of knocked it down. And so it slid down into my honorable mentions. Yeah. But no, that was, and what was amazing about that game is you could say they're down 20 and a half. 15 minutes ago, the game was tied. I mean, they just went on this incredible run in a short amount of time. It was, and that was Buddy Hield was on that team.
Yep.
Oh, that team ended up making the Final Four.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one ever talks about that game because that team was, again, Mac's been here, 12, 13 years now. I mean, that's far and away his worst team, so everybody kind of forgets about it. But that was an unbelievable game.
Unbelievable. And the only reason it wasn't like a bigger crowd, I think it was like a Tuesday night and the weather went all, it was November and the weather went all that great and everything. Yep. But no, that is right at the top of my honorable mention. I'm so glad you brought the Seton Hall road game because that's the first road game I thought of that said.
That's the best road game. I think I was trying to think of other road games. I mean, that team that year won a couple of big road games. That team won at the Wells Fargo Center. against Villanova. That team won at top 10 Marquette with Marcus Howard. So that team had some big road wins that year, but I'm trying to think back of other years of big road wins.
The one that came to mind was UConn, where we pulled that one out in overtime when DJ hit that shot.
Yes. Yep.
That was a good road win there.
Yep.
I would say.
But wasn't that the COVID year? Marquette, what season, Zach?
At Marquette.
When O'Connell hit that shot to tie it?
Yeah.
That was great.
Was that last season?
But they were not as good that year, Marquette.
That was 2 seasons ago. Yeah, that's a good call. That was a crazy one. I kind of forgot about that one. Yeah.
I was on the way to the studio, and I got to the stoplight down here and heard Bishop go nuts and turned around and ran back home to watch the end of the overtime. Yep. It was crazy. So Oklahoma, the Seton Hall one. Oddly enough, I threw this in here just to talk about it. But oddly enough, like the game everybody talks about and shows video, and it hardly even came up, was the game at Villanova where Doug and Jehens and Rogge went crazy.
Yeah, geez, I didn't even think of that one.
The only thing there was it was at Wells Fargo. It wasn't at the Pavilion, so the crowd wasn't, and the crowd was out. People left half that. Number one. Number two, it was a total blowout. It was an incredible performance.
That game kind of lives in lore.
Sure. Yeah. It got national. Like, I think it was on Kornheiser's and Wilbon. I think they had it like their number one thing on their deal was what Creighton did to Villanova.
Yeah.
And then, you kind of brought it up a little bit, Ross. Isn't it amazing? Probably you can argue this, but the greatest team of all time that's made it the furthest of any Creighton team of all time, and we've hardly mentioned any games. And again, this one was honorable mention and didn't make my list, but Xavier this year at home, when we blew the doors off. That atmosphere was really big time. Everybody was into it.
We had a few Saturday games this year that were all pretty good and pretty fun. The Providence one.
UConn. The reason I didn't put UConn in this year,
UConn was fun. I thought the UConn
it was a rock fight.
I thought the UConn game though. I thought the UConn home game was louder than the Xavier game.
That game.
Well, because we blew Xavier out, it got time. Yeah, I'm just saying when we were laying that on them, the crowd was going crazy. I just didn't have it because it was rock. I wanted to, because there again, it was a game where we beat the national championship during the regular season.
Well, also we haven't even no one for some reason this has gotten completely lost in translation, but road games this past year we lost in double overtime at Providence. That was an unbelievable game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I guess we're not thinking about losses, right? Okay. So here's my list. Some have been mentioned, some haven't. The first one, I know I'm kind of like breaking my rule of games that, maybe don't hold the same water now that they did then. But my number 5 was Wisconsin in Las Vegas. Doug's junior year, so to speak. But
yeah,
that game, because we had not played, really too many big-time teams at that point. And we were still in the Valley. It was the last year in the Valley. And playing Wisconsin. And, of course, Wisconsin was Bo Ryan was coach, and they were always good. And that was an intense game. It was, you could tell it on the Creighton players that night. Like, they knew it was a big game because you could, I know there was times where Doug missed some shots he normally makes just because it was such a pressure-packed game. And the way we handled that game and won was
So were all those other games you just mentioned, those were the honorable mention ones then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And again, I could kick that game out real easy. I guess I was at courtside and you could just I go by a lot by like when you can feel the electricity.
When you're at the game, yeah.
You can feel the electricity. The next one, number 4, was the 18 game against Villanova when they won the national championship. They never lost another game after we beat them. Now, what was so crazy about that's a forgotten game because that team was in a huge slump going into that game. And everybody thought, oh, we're just going to get killed by Villanova tonight and da-da-da. And we won in overtime, and that was a thrilling game.
That team was also down. That team was down like 8 with like 2.5 minutes left and came back.
It looked like it was over. And, yeah, that was a great game. And again, significance there is that we have now in 5 years beaten the national championship, the national champion in the regular season twice. We've done it twice now. Ross, I'm number 3. I've got the Arkansas game this year. Again, if you're watching on TV, I mean, it was still good watching on TV, but being there, that was just an absolute war. And it wasn't a rock fight war. It was a war of, who's going to hit the 3 this time down and make the go drive in for the dunk. And it was just athletes on the floor and just all over. I mean, it was just, and it's such a small gym and it was just packed and people were going nuts. The other neutral fans were going crazy at that game. And it was.
And I think we might look back in a few years. I mean, I think they might have lost. I can't remember if Arkansas lost in the second round or Sweet 16 this past year. And they dealt with some injuries and
Nick Smith didn't play that game.
Didn't finish the way I think they wanted to or their fans wanted to this year. But we might look back in a few years and say, holy crap, Arkansas had all those dudes on the same team.
They had 3 guys get drafted this season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing, too, is, in the press conference, and I know Musselman was upset about that last. Well, he's upset about the calls.
He was such a baby about that. Last
30 seconds. But you should have seen his face beside the call. You could just tell he was just like, God, we lost that, We gave every ounce of our energy into that game and we lost,
And I think
so that was your number 2?
The reason
that was my number 3.
That was number 3.
Arkansas kind of had that slump was Trevon Brazile tore his ACL, who was a monster against Creighton in that game.
Oh, he killed us.
I mean, God, if Nick Smith would have played that game, we'd have had them at full strength. I mean, it was like crazy. And again, like I said, I saw him. He was right in front of me warming up, and I'm like, how is that dude? If that dude's hurt, that dude is going to be one of the best basketball players. He was warming up. I'm like, oh my God, like this guy's incredible. And then I've got the same as Zach. I got Providence and Seton Hall to round it out. You just can't. There was, the other thing about Doug's game, his last game, was there was a lot of buildup that whole week toward that game. I mean, that was a long buildup going into that game. It's like everybody knew this was it, and for him to do that, and just the crowd was so electric. And God, who was their big 4 that was so good on that team? Why can't it's on the tip of my tongue. For Providence. He's about 6'9", 6'10". He was really a good player.
On what Providence team?
The Providence team that played Doug in Doug's last game. What's his name? Anyway, the iconic shot of him going out and Doug just canning one from about 28 feet, and he just kind of went. He turned to Cooley and goes, "What do you want me to do?"
Might have been LaDante Henton, maybe.
That's him. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was just the like, what do you want me to do? I can't do anything. The guy's unstoppable. But there's so many other games, like you mentioned, Ross. So many road games. Zach, you brought up the Marquette game where O'Connell hit the shot.
He had 2 of them.
Yeah. Just
no one will ever talk about it because it was the COVID year, and so things were so different. But the game at KU was unbelievable.
Yes, that was a great game too. That probably cost us, when you look back at it. And I know we talked about it as bracketologists. Like, had Creighton won that game, that could have bumped them a seed line, and then they wouldn't have been in Gonzaga's path. That could have changed a lot of things for that team. But yeah, pretty darn cool that we've beaten the national championship team 2 years out of the last 5.
A lot of big wins, a lot of big games. I mean, gosh, some of these big. I have a broken record on this. I'm sorry. I've said it 1,000 times on our show. If you're a Creighton fan, you have to go to the Big East tournament at least once, because some of the games I've seen at Big East tournament, our games, some of them not our games. The atmosphere is so good that it'll make your head spin.
I did go, Ross, and there was like 100 people in the building. I thought it was pretty much of a downer.
When?
When you were doing play-by-play,
when
you were doing play-by-play, and I was sitting right behind you.
That one was a little bit different. That was an interesting atmosphere, but not for the same reasons.
That was weird. Having Adrian Ryder walk by me like 2 minutes ago in the half. He goes, "Hey, this is it. We're done." I'm like,
I still remember. I remember John
change the flight so we can get the hell out of here.
I remember John and I still had to be on air, and still do all the post game stuff. And as they're breaking everything down, by the time that John and I got out of there, broke everything down. I mean, there was not more than 8 people in the entire arena. It was really eerie. It was really creepy, and I had to get out of there and walk back to the hotel. And so I was walking around Madison Square Garden concourse, and it was like dark on the concourse. It was just the most surreal, most bizarre experience of my life.
It was, yeah. And I think the fact that we were in New York, being in Omaha wasn't the same. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
From even that night, remember that night before, you and I were texting. I was at the team hotel in the bar, and you and I were texting. You said, "I bet you we're not going to play." And then we went to that alumni thing, and it was packed with people. Mitch was there. I mean, it was, it was just like everything going on.
Yeah.
And to go from that night when we went back to the hotel, the streets were packed, and to the day when I walked back, even at the time I walked back to the arena, like it was lunchtime in New York, and there was nobody around. And then to the airport with no traffic. It was amazing. Yeah. It was
weird few days that was.
You can't describe it. New York, it's just so different. It's just, gosh. Yeah. Maybe this year, Ross, I'll go.
I think you should. I'd like to go back this year.
We're actually working on, for whatever reason, and don't ask me why, but our mock selection committee guys want to go to the Valley tournament. And I'm like, I still know some people at Valley. We could probably make this work, guys, if you really want to. And so they were like, yeah, let's do this. I'm like, okay. So we might go and do our mock selection committee thing there, which would be kind of cool, but I don't know if we will or not. We got too many other chickens in the fryer right now. But anyway, that's our list. I'm sure everybody else can disagree with it all you want. I don't think you'll disagree with number 1. There's just there's no.
Yeah, there's not another one that comes to mind.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough not to have Doug's last game in the top 3 or 4. I mean, after that, I can see differing opinions on all kinds of games.
Yeah. It's hard to even have a tournament game or a Big East game top the Seton Hall game. I can't even think of one.
Yeah.
Now,
I'll tell you what we'll do. Here's what
San Diego State might be the most infamous game now.
Here's what we'll do next. Here's what we'll do next week for next week's show. Let's do postseason. So that includes Big East tournament and NCAA tournament. The top 5. Fair?
Sure.
It'll be a little bit easier. There's a smaller sample size. But I think you've got to really think hard about these Big East games because there's a lot of them.
A lot of good ones.
I already have my number 1 for Big East tournament games.
And let's not forget the like the Alabama Creighton NIT game. Okay, I'm joking. All right, that's wrapping it up.
When was that?
What?
When was that game?
We were a 4 seed and they were a 5. And we played Alabama in the second round and beat them. Then we beat somebody, went all the way through an upset. I think it was Fairfield had a big upset. So then they were 8-4. We beat them. And then we went to TCU, right? That was our side of the bracket. We'd have won that game. We'd have gone to Madison Square Garden and we lost that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Fairfield game was just terrible. It was like an 11 o'clock game on Saturday morning. There was nobody really there, and it was atmosphere sucked. And the Alabama atmosphere, I remember, was pretty good.
I think you got your teams mixed up. I think it was Memphis. Actually, I know it was Memphis because I was there.
Was that 2016?
Mike Miller was in 2018. 2018, 2019. Mike Miller was on staff.
There was an Alabama game, Ross.
In the NCAA tournament.
Are you doubting that we didn't have it? Are you doubting we had an Alabama game in the NIT?
I am doubting that, yes.
Okay. We're going to look that up right now because I'll guarantee, God, I swear to God. It was Avery Johnson was the coach.
You might be right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe you and I are confusing our years.
Yeah, I remember Memphis was more...
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right as far because maybe that.
I might be off a year. What year would this have been? What year would this have been?
We lost to TCU the 2018-2019 year. That would have been Mitch Ballock's freshman. Year.
Let's see it. Here we go. Let's look at that year. Let's look at that year. You're right. I totally agree with you. All right. So there's TCU. You're right. Memphis, Loyola. Yeah, Loyola. No, this was a different year.
Yeah, I think you're thinking about the Cole Huff year because I remember that year too.
Yeah. Loyola was big because
you might be right on Alabama. You might be right on Alabama.
Final Four that year? Or was that the year before they went to Final Four?
Yeah, I think that's the year after the Final Four. You might be right on Alabama. I think who you had there for Fairfield, I think was actually Wagner.
Could be.
And then they lost to BYU at BYU.
That's correct, Zach.
That was the year. Okay. There you go. So that was probably 16, huh?
Yeah, that would have been 2016. I was living in Portland at the time.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It was a nice call on Wagner, Ross. He won that game by 33 points.
Jeez.
And we beat Alabama by 18.
Jeez.
And that's the year we lost to Seton Hall in the first game of the Big East tournament, which is a game I don't even remember. We got beat pretty good there, too. Interesting. But, all right. Great. Hey, make sure to sign up for the Blue Banner Golf Tournament sponsored by West Pacific Dental Group. One of our fine sponsors here, along with Equitable Bank. We take banking personally, and Infusion Brewery. More to come on Infusion later in a later show. Next week, like we said, we're gonna do the top 5 postseason games, Big East tournament, NCAA tournament games. I don't think there's any memorable NIT games. I don't think so.